Okay, our next presenter is Doug Spate, and Doug is going to speak on the topic of digital 3D holographic microscopy.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Good afternoon. My name is Doug Spate. I'm on the commercialization team. I'm responsible for the technology digital 3D holography. I also have the principal investigator here, Philip Bingham. Philip, raise your hand. And Philip will be fielding all of your substantial questions. If you want them right, he'll be answering them. So let's start, if we will, with the problem in the marketplace. Okay, so what's happening now is that everything's shrinking. Right, for the past 10 years or so, the focus has increased on nanoscale engineering and manufacturing, not just synthesis of materials, but also manufacturing of devices. I mean, you need a pretty small screwdriver to get down to, 1/1000th of a meter. So there's an increased focus on imaging at that level. At the same time, manufacturing processes are getting more rapid, with higher throughput, so there's a focus on feeding technologies through a processing or manufacturing line quicker. And then, as well, there's a focus on new materials, all new materials, an entirely new class as well. So with the emergence of metamaterials, which combine the performance aspects of certain materials with others, working at the nanoscale allows you to change a lot of those performance characteristics and fundamentally change the materials themselves. So you need technologies that will enable you to work at that scale. So of course, what we've developed is a digital 3D holographic microscopy system, or DHM, if you will. It's a combination of both hardware and software. Measures surface features, height, topography, displacement, all using light wave front information. It also calculates these images mathematically by a reconstructive algorithm. So the aspects of our technology that are pretty unique are high resolution and precision at the nanoscale, but also high throughput, high speed, height and phase information that you can get from this method, and also low cost. So this technology was actually born out of a partnership with the semiconductor industry back in the mid-1990s when everything was going great. Semiconductor manufacturers were interested in measuring high aspect features on wafers and disk drives. Essentially, they wanted to be able to detect deformities and defects very quickly, very accurately, and that's how this started. So for my oversimplification of how this whole thing works, enter a laser, a light source, and a camera. All right, laser fires a light source on the ground, on the object. It bounces back. Camera captures the image, and if the laser and the camera are in a fixed position, they know exactly how far this is. So take samples, get to an object, and you know that this level is different from the others. All right, so oversimplification, but again, you get the idea. Just bouncing light off of surfaces. So what this does is gives us, as you can see, in B, gives us an opportunity to shoot a laser on a reference path. Again, this is the one on the ground that tells you how far the sample is, bounces into the camera. Then object path laser goes to the sample, back into the camera. You're able to measure features on the site. For transparent materials, if you're working in plastics or different types of materials that are transparent, translucent, you can also incorporate the sample here. The light passes through, the laser passes through that object and into the camera. So it gives you, so again, an oversimplification, but you get the idea. Most of the samples that we take are on axis, of course, straight down. Right? So it hits an object, was able to tell where that object is, but a unique aspect of ours is that we can actually do off-axis as well. So not only can you tell the difference between the floor and the top, but you can also tell information about the sides as well. All right, this is a photo of an early prototype that was developed in the, late 1990s, roughly? So the technology opportunity is this. It's at a relatively advanced stage of development. You're at a TRL6. The prototype has been demonstrated. In fact, several have been fabricated and tested in operational environments. The system has also been utilized in multiple contracts with industry partners. Two systems that were developed here at ORNL have been sent to Cimatech directly and AMD. Advanced micro devices as well. There are 15 patents in this portfolio, so it's a pretty stable space in terms of ORNL. But there are two patents in particular that we're focusing in on for this presentation. Further development. One, we need to make this more modular so that it adds on to existing components, existing microscopes. We need to incorporate several new technologies, higher resolution lasers, but at the same time we need to reduce some of the optics hardware to reduce some of the bouncing around of the light waves, right? So in doing that, that will eliminate a lot of the background noise that we get in our results. So novel and unique elements, one-shot Fourier analysis. Again, very quickly, goes through, you could have samples going through a production line, moving at speed, get a camera, take a picture, process the image. It records in less than 5 microseconds. So again, it's great for a production line where things are moving. Off-axis fusion, again, features on the sides of very small items of materials. Content-based segmentation allows you to pick out deformities in a very large space. Again, this is needle in a haystack, right? So you're trying to search a large area or a lot of samples for a defect. This allows you to do that very quickly and efficiently. Some of the potential hurdles, one is every material has a refractive index. Say that 3 times fast. And each material refractive index, the refractive index must be known in order to get an accurate sample. So that's a problem because all materials, again, have very different RIs. That needs to be incorporated into the system because the system has to account for that. And also moving to smaller wavelengths, getting better and better lasers has some ROI trade-off as well. So again, there's a cost-benefit analysis that needs to be done. In terms of performance, this information here, really these 2 columns here are the most important. Those show the standard deviation, or essentially how accurate this unit is. And because of these results here, we get within 1.5 nanometers accuracy. Right? So that's extraordinarily accurate. The commercialization plan is this. One, we want to focus on a product approach, an add-on component for microscopes, but there's also an opportunity for OEM manufacturing as well, being able to incorporate our system into an existing manufacturer's system. Some of the early milestones, we need to expand the dialogue in the medical community to understand what aspects are important for the biological applications. And we also need to develop a partnership with a major microscope vendor, such as Zeiss or Leica and the others. This is relatively flexible. It could be a startup or it could be a licensee. Because of the relatively low capital costs on the front end, this could be very well a startup company that gets acquired by one of the major manufacturers. So what are the applications? There are really 3 areas that are the biggest opportunities. One is material science. I spoke about semiconductor industry. The technology is currently being used for wafer inspection, again, trying to identify defects. Micro device inspection, again, you have to know that your technology that you're building at 1/1000th of a meter is actually working the way it should. But the biological market is the one that we're going to focus in on now because there aren't heavily entrenched players. There's a great market opportunity there in life sciences for biological cell analysis and also rapid eye imaging. So again, this is an untapped market altogether because I don't know how many of you have had LASIK surgeries, but this is all doctors' intuition, right? They use lasers to essentially reform the cornea, and pardon the pun, but they just kind of eyeball it, right? They don't know exactly how much they took off. It's like, that's good, come back in a week, and if you can see, then it worked. So this is a great opportunity here for rapid eye imaging. And also in the entertainment space, believe it or not, holographic 3D TV is coming. It's right around the corner. In fact, a member of the original development team, Tommy Thomas, has started a company in Knoxville, Third Dimension Technologies, is that correct? So this is another area that's coming rapidly. Competitive differentiation, particularly in the biological cell space, there are only about 5 companies that do this. All of them are less than 6 years old. 4 in Europe, 1 in Canada, and all are focusing on different aspects of the marketplace. So the market opportunity is this. I mean, the total market size for microscopy is $3.6 billion roughly. Obviously, that isn't all addressable. But for the performance enhancers and the add-ons, there's about a $936 million opportunity there. And it's growing at a relatively decent pace, 10% roughly, give or take. So again, your strategy is startup, licensee, collaborate with the medical community to learn more about the biological applications and what this technology needs to incorporate in order to meet that market. Non-dilutive round of funding, either SBIR or strategic partnership, but this is going to be critical, your strategic partnership with a microscopy vendor, like a Zeiss, like a Leica, like a Nikon, Olympus, all the big players. So in summary, ORNL has developed a technology, a DHM system that's pretty advanced. The advance it's a little bit of a trade-off. Obviously, you don't get the large market opportunity that you do with some other technologies, but it's a good one nonetheless. Because it requires very little, you can run it relatively lean, doesn't require a lot of capital up front or fixed costs. You can run a startup on relatively nothing, on a shoestring. The system itself incorporates high precision resolution at nanoscale. Also is a one-shot technique, again, great for manufacturing processes where technologies are moving under the sensor very quickly, and it's relatively low cost. And it's perfect for markets that require rapid, non-invasive measurement, resolution at the nanoscale, and also 3D volume information. So with that, I'll conclude. Again, Philip Bingham is here to answer all of the hard questions, so I'll open it up for questions then. Before you ask a question, you have to catch the laser, though. Yeah, Scott.
Has this been demonstrated using near-infrared spectrometry? Is there a possibility that it could be, and what do you think would be its ability to image hard and soft tissue?
So Philip, hold answer because we've got people listening online.
Yeah, so in near hour hasn't been looked at, but it would be actually easier than going to smaller wavelengths. That would be a longer wavelength for us. So it would be trivial to do. It would be good for soft tissues or not hard to reflect off. It really depends on how much signal you get off of the first layer. So you can get confusion if you get signals coming off multiple layers and you need to reconstruct. You have to work on reconstruction algorithms to deal with multiple returns. So it really depends on the reflectivity of the surface for that wavelength.
There's no obvious technical impediment to going in that direction.
No, not at all.
Next question. Eric.
Yep. Thank you. If you're looking at the biological applications, obviously you got to be considering FDA approval, clinical trials, things like that. Have you thought through the time and effort required to get through those FDA trials?
You want to take that one?
No.
In a word, no.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So what is the limiting factor in resolution? Is it wavelength? I mean, moving to UV, would that improve your resolution?
So there's two resolutions here. There's spatial resolution that's wavelength dependent, right? So you've got half the wavelength limit that we all have. And then there's the phase measurement. So right now, the noise he was showing you there when he was saying 1.5 nanometers, that's a depth measurement. You can get about a 1.5 nanometer resolution with the system we're running now, which actually has a lot of noise problems with it. That's part of reducing the optics and such. So the notion for interferometry is you can get down at the angstrom level with the phase, with the height information, if you get it exactly right. But we all know building a system, you're going to get some noise that's going to affect you.
So actually, that was the one question that I could have answered. But anyway, Mike.
So,
So much for that. Then.
so Philip, I see you have a working prototype, and my question is how close is that to being something that could be a kludgy product? And if it could be a fairly short path to a product, what would it cost to build the product, and what could you sell it for?
So the one he showed was for the semiconductor industry, and that was a very expensive one to build. It's the stage, the big black unit that you saw there has 20 nanometer accuracy to move objects around. So that's the big cost of the thing. It was also built for 532 nanometer light with a long coherence length, and we had to have some custom optics for back reflection. So all in all, if you built that system we showed there exactly the way it was, it would probably cost, in the $1 million to $500,000 range. Now, Chris Mann, who was an employee with us for a while, and the two new patents, by the way, are combinations on a microscope. So we took a microscope that does fluorescence microscopy, and we've added the holography technique to it. And so for just off-the-shelf parts, putting them together, a couple $1,000s worth of parts were added to this microscope to add a little laser, to add a camera, to add the beam combiner cubes at the top, to do holography through cells. So that one could be added. That one, right now, there's 2 prototypes over there on regular desktop microscopes that will do holography on them, one in reflective and one in transmission right now that we have sitting over there. And those, like I said, under 10,000 in parts for sure, but probably you could get it down much lower.
And just looking at comparable laboratory equipment, what would it sell for?
So I'm not a buyer of microscopes. I wouldn't give you a really good guess, but microscopes tend to. This kind of microscope, I would say, would be in the the tens of thousands of dollars if you're going to buy something that had a technique like this, and it wouldn't be uncommon. I mean, it's competing with something called a phase shift interferometer, and you'd buy a phase shift interferometer if you didn't have something that was moving fast. The notion is it can stop motion. You can do a height measurement with something fast. A phase shift interferometer could be up in the $100,000 range real easy. So you're competing with something that's pretty expensive.
Any other questions?
From the Energy Portal, we have a question from Craig Butler. It says, by heterodyne, is this using multiple light frequencies to get the reflective responses?
So phase imaging has the problem with phase wraps, and phase wraps will lose a signal. So 2 heights look exactly the same. 0 degrees and 360 degrees look exactly the same. So we will use 2 wavelengths and try to expand that range that we can measure. And by doing that, we can take both of those in the same image. The way it's reconstructed, we can reconstruct multiple images in a single, and that's what one of the patents is about. We put at least 3 in these in an image before. So that way we get more depth of field for the height measurement.
Excellent. Any other questions? Great, thank you. To get this.
Okay, so Doug has allowed me to pinch hit for him and present one of his technologies, and this is really liberating because it's not my technology, it's Doug's. I didn't invent it. Nancy Erickson and Tim McKnight, who are here, invented it. So I'm going to tell you what I think is true and then rely on them to tell you what really is true. If you look at the human body, you can describe it a number of different ways, but one way to talk about it is as an extraordinarily intricate plumbing system. And if you look at the different types of plumbing, we have vascular plumbing, we have digestive tract, we have the lymph system, you have the reproductive system. And in each of these cases, there are times when you simply have to have a new valve. And these two inventors have developed a biocompatible valve that can be remotely actuated that has the potential to solve some really important problems. So, quick summary again, the valve is biocompatible, appropriate for millimeter scale applications. The competing technologies tend to require somewhat larger diameters, remotely activatable, and it's normally closed or normally open. Now, they've demonstrated for their specific initial application a normally closed application, but they think it should be probably even easier to go to a normally open application. So why do they do this? But one of the cool things about Oak Ridge National Lab and any national lab is that we are staffed with problem solvers. And a scientist or physician from the Baylor College of Medicine came to them with a question about how to solve a relatively rare in utero disease or condition. And the condition is a congenital diaphragmatic hernia. And what happens is if you look at this, this is a normal baby, and as like most of us, you have the diaphragm that creates a barrier between the abdominal organs and the lungs and the heart. And in the case of a baby that has this diaphragmatic hernia, the diaphragm is penetrated, and as a part of development, the abdominal organs go up into the chest cavity and actually press against the lungs and prevent the lungs from developing properly. Well, this physician that came to Nance and Tim had read from research in France that if the the trachea of the developing infant is blocked, they've shown that the lungs tend to overdevelop and could potentially have enough pressure to push the organs back down into the abdomen. So that's the theory. It's been demonstrated, I think, a couple of times. But the challenge is if you fully block the trachea, the lungs tend to develop improperly, and while you solve the problem of the diaphragmatic hernia, you don't solve the problem of the lung development. So they were asked to develop a biocompatible, size appropriate for developing fetuses, trachea, valve that is normally closed but could be remotely made open so that you avoid this problem of having the lungs develop improperly. And this is what they came up with. You have this tube that could be delivered by endoscope. You would expect to have air travel here. You would have a polymer valve that is here. If it's closed, it would be expanded and against this wall. And when it's opened, you have a path for air to flow. You activate the valve simply by heating it, and you heat it using a tuned RF antenna. So the notion would be you have an RF source outside of the body. It activates this tuned RF antenna. That drives a heater coil. Heating the polymer, in this case, causes the polymer to contract. That's actually a very unusual polymer. And when the polymer contracts, you have an open pathway. Your valve is open. And then when you remove the source of energy, the polymer cools, it expands, closes it, and then you no longer have an open valve. And then the other thing just to mention is you have the normal balloon catheter kind of technology that comes down this little tube here, and that creates the seal around the trachea. So that's the design. It's a really clever engineering solution to a really unusual problem, and we think that it has application in a number of other places. Here's, again, another look at it, probably more to scale. Again, the heating element, the circuit for receiving the RF energy, and then the valve that closes right here. What's cool about it is you can see that as the temperature increases, it doesn't have to increase much above the body temperature at all before you have a significant change and the valve opens. And so it's a rather sensitive valve that can open and close kind of easily. What do we know about it? Well, it's been demonstrated at the bench scale with the components separately. They haven't integrated it yet. So we say that it's probably, if I look at the definition that we handed out today, at TRL3. There are some open questions. We believe that the polymer is biocompatible. There's no reason to think that it's not, but that hasn't been demonstrated, so there could be questions of the polymer being rejected. There could be some pH sensitivity. We don't know about that. Reliability, particularly for long-term use, hasn't been nailed down. So these showstoppers that we see are because of where we are in the development, not because we think that there's necessarily a specific problem. So the next steps will be to fully integrate the prototype device, perform animal studies, and then explore alternative approaches to actuating the device. So the easiest thing to do is to go with the RF, but we think it could be actuated optically. It could be actuated with ultrasound. So there are a number of ways that you could have a signal to turn this thing on and off. And then you may want to look also, we talked about normally open valve. And as I mentioned, this particular polymer is one that contracts when you heat it. Most polymers expand, so there's no reason at all to think that you couldn't have a normally open valve. So why do we think this has potential to be significant? Well, because it is a polymer valve, we believe that it very likely will be biocompatible. We have every reason to think that it will be stable, which will provide a long lifetime. The highly tuned RF actuation is probably the coolest thing. You can choose the frequency very narrowly, and that allows you to turn it on with a specific frequency, which means that you can avoid having it inadvertently turned on. You could also imagine having a cocktail of these in, so that you could choose your therapy based on the condition. You can choose which valves you open if you have multiple valves in parallel, depending based on the spectrum that you send down. Small diameter. We think this is probably the unique advantage here. There are other valves that are out there that I'll talk about in a minute, but this one has the potential to be particularly small. Novel positioning and control technologies. We think that if you do something besides RF, there may be other ways to have. You know what, guys? I apologize for that. The first three, this is a holdover on an old slide. Competitive differentiation. There are some valves that are out there that are simply actuated by pressure. This has the difference of being something that you can actuate on demand rather than based on the pressure in the biological system. There are micropumps out there. We think this is just a different creature than a micropump, and rather than actively forcing something down, you just have the ability to open and close. And they're magnetic valves. And I would say that these magnetic valves are probably the most likely competitor. And that is, rather than actuating it with an RF signal, you actuate it with a magnetic field. We think that this has the potential to be smaller and a little bit more robust than a mechanical valve that's actuated with a magnet, but we don't know that to be true. So what's the market opportunity if this thing pans out? Well, to be honest, a congenital diaphragmatic hernia probably isn't a significant market opportunity. While it's really important to the families that are affected, 1,600 cases annually probably isn't enough to drive a significant business. But there are other conditions. Hydrocephalus, which is a case of having uneven or high pressure in the brain, is typically resolved with just putting shunts in place. That doesn't always work. There may be opportunities to tune the response of the shunts by putting an active valve in place. Implantable drug delivery, that's a $10 billion market. There are a number of devices in place that have to go through the body wall before you can control them. The ability to put a dose in the body and then seal it to avoid infection has real potential. And this is where I think having the ability to turn on and off different valves at different times, allowing you to design the cocktail that you provide, could be really interesting. And then this is one, I like to say that as I'm sneaking up on the age of 60, this isn't nearly as funny as it used to be, but urinary incontinence affects 35% of adults over the age of 60. There might be a wonderful opportunity to put in line a valve and really help people's quality of life, and that could be a $1 billion opportunity. Overall, the world market for implantable medical devices is valued at $33 billion. This would only be a part of that, but it has the potential to be significant. So how would you do this? Well, we have a technology that is in early days. We also have a technology that could potentially be funded using federal dollars for orphan conditions. So if I were doing this, I would recommend a startup company license it, collaborate with Research Hospital and the Oak Ridge National Laboratory to move it down the development path. Look for non-dilutive R&D investments. Look for the opportunity to get SBIRs. Look for other grants. Because this does address conditions that don't necessarily have a market driver behind them, you could bring in dollars without having to give up equity. It's not a fast path, but I think it could be a path to keep ownership of the company. And then raise funds for product development. At some point, there's certainly going to have to be a 510K, and then you launch. And if you can find a market niche and get up and running, there are a number of folks who are big boys that play in this space that could be potential acquirers. So that's one approach. I'm sure there are others, but if I were going to do this, I would say start small, grow organically in a space that doesn't have significant competitors, and then try to migrate into a larger market space and look for one of these acquirers.
So in summary, Oak Ridge has an early-stage technology for in vivo control of fluids. It was initially designed for treatment of congenital diaphragmatic hernias, but it should have a range of other options. I think it's appropriate for an SBIR-funded company, and I think it makes sense to grow the company organically, beginning with a rare or orphan condition, and then try to move into a different marketplace. And with that, I'll be happy to direct your questions to Nance and Tim.
Mike?
Yes,
so, not a technology-specific question. I'm interested in the lab's current posture on entrepreneurial leave. The SBIR-funded startup company would be a great scenario for that, and I understand things are changing here. Do you have any comments on that?
So I can say that there are actually two different things that are out there. Entrepreneurial leave is an opportunity for a scientist to step away from the lab, actually sever their employment with the lab, but with the commitment from the lab that if at all possible, at the end of the leave, it'll be possible to come back. The nice thing about that is it removes all of your obligations to report your intellectual property, all of your conflict of interest. So that's a nice way to go if you can be part of a company that can help you keep the lights on at home while you're starting the company. It's also possible to become a part-time employee, and that is a management decision between the employee's manager and human resources. If you're a part-time employee, then you could potentially have the flexibility to participate in an SBIR-funded startup. The requirement for an SBIR is that you be at least 50% active with the company that has the SBIR. If you're a part-time employee, though, you do have some strings on your intellectual property that go back to the UT Battelle, and you have some conflict of interest things that need to be managed. So those are the two pathways, and we're trying very hard to be entrepreneurial, but at the same time aligned with the requirements of the lab.
Mike, can you talk about the power requirements to transmit some of this energy through the body?
Gentlemen? Let's see, Nance, have you got the air? Yeah.
The power transmission requirements are really dictated by the size of the implant. And if you look at that, you notice that we had a ferrite core in the inductor. We're talking milliwatts of power transmitted. We've got a very effective heating element in there, a high Q kind of receiver circuit, okay? And it takes a very small temperature increase to actuate the valve. So those combined together, we think will get us, well within medical requirements.
But even milliwatts going through the body, that's a tough thing to do, right?
It can be tough, yes. Depends on the frequency. And we're operating in the 100 to 200 kilohertz range at this point. Fairly low frequencies, which we have low absorption in the body at those frequencies. You also, one thing that was pointed out to us by the physicians we're working with, that is that this is a medical treatment. Radiation is a medical treatment. So there are conditions where you take actions that you may not want to use every day on a healthy person that you would do in a situation where someone is unhealthy or has a specific need. It's a risk-benefit kind of analysis. We don't think we're getting in that space with the power required for this, but that was something that our physicians repeatedly pointed out to us.
Yes, sir.
I missed the temperature change, but would that be a problem if, say, someone were to come down with a fever or something like that? You wouldn't be able to shut off the valve?
Yes, as the valve is optimized right now, a high fever would probably cause flow through the valve, but the polymer can actually be tweaked. We developed a blend of different polymers which have different transition points. And right now, physicians wanted to drive it at this 40. Actuation method with having a fever is also a possibility. You could actually use the fever to deliver a therapeutic.
Let's see, so I think we're ready for our next speaker.
So once again, we have Big Cheryl, who will be presenting a technology magnetic filtration process.
Thank you. First of all, if I make any technical mistakes, it's okay because I'm really not technically up on this like I should be, so we have the principal investigator here and we can ask him questions when we're done. And I also like to remember that never let the facts get in the way of a good story, so we'll just see where this goes. All right, this technology is magnetic filtering. And what's really interesting about magnetic filtering, it was actually first invented as a patent around 1792. And it's really cool because nobody understood why magnets worked. They just understood that they did and they could use them. So the very first thing that was done with a magnetic filter was simply separation of magnetic alloys with some of the chaff. So think magnetic filtering, you're pulling something along the way, and that's what the magnet does. Now, since then, the technology's progressed to the point where when I was growing up, we would take the magnets and put them inside oil pans of our cars so they could actually take the little metal filaments and pull it in. It actually works very effective. They've also got it down to the point where magnetic filtering can actually absorb nano-sized particles. So the basic concept is very simple. You have a magnet, you have some metal, and they're attracted to each other. That's not what this is, okay? But you get the idea of the simple part of that. I want to switch gears, and I want to talk about activated charcoal. Okay, activated charcoal is this miracle substance that we figured out years ago. You take a little piece of charcoal, which is very inexpensive, very easy to produce. You heat it to a certain temperature, you inject some gases into it, and lo and behold, this activated charcoal has the surface area of it, just tremendous amounts of surface area. In fact, something like 1 gram would be 100 square meters of surface area. You can buy activated charcoal right now. It's well produced. It's produced all over the world. There's no patents associated with it. It's an incredibly inexpensive product. You can get it in pellet form, and you can get it in this little granular form, and you can get it in this tiny little size stuff. Okay, so I'm talking about magnetic filtering, but at the same time, I'm talking about activated charcoal. Well, the genius of one more thing on the activated charcoal. This is a real demonstration. 1 teaspoon of activated charcoal would cover the amount of surface area as an entire football field. So you see the huge property of surface area to size here, and that's what is significant. The genius of this is that they took a magnet and they combined it with the activated charcoal. They then make this little product that's activated charcoal with this little magnetite built in. Now, this analogy doesn't quite work simply because it's not really a magnet inside the activated charcoal. It's actually magnetite. And the difference is really subtle but very powerful. Magnetite will maintain and hold a magnetic field while it's in a magnetic field. But once you take the magnetic field away, it's not magnetic. So the reason this is significant is because these little tiny particles of activated charcoal can now be attracted via magnetic field. So I can take this activated charcoal, I can put it in any kind of substance that I want to filter, any organics, VOCs, any heavy metals. They will be attracted to the carbon, all the different porous areas inside the carbon particle. And then I can take this and I can actually put a magnet and pull all of this stuff out. So the genius here, the inventor's genius, wasn't the activated charcoal, and it wasn't the magnetic filtering, it was really the combining of the two to generate something that's incredibly simple, it's very powerful, and has huge applications. This is a picture of their initial apparatus. This is currently a technology level 4, and the patent is available for this, and they're actually taking this and experimenting with it at different stages. There are some issues they have to solve, which are the different parameters in flow rate, the intensity of the magnetic field, the size of the particulate, etc. All those things can be done very straightforward, as there don't appear to be any showstoppers with this. So where's the real market for this? Well, this is just something I'm going to focus on this. It's just an easy, low-hanging fruit. Water filtering and recovery. We all know water is important, and we all know that the amount of pollutants that are generated by industry is quite high, and we've got to do something with it. Well, we can use this technology to filter simple water production. It's, again, incredibly inexpensive. It takes almost no energy to do this. You put the magic particles in there, you let them do all the filtering through the mixing, You put a magnet on the other side of it, and the particulates flow out. It's a real interesting technology because you can now take this medium that you've just attracted all of the pollutants you wanted, and it's reusable. You can either heat the medium, or there's other processes you can do to it, and you can just simply keep re-adding it to the material, and it's a really high flow rate. I'm now not putting any kind of blockage to filter the flow rate. I'm basically pulling the particles out through a magnetic field. Again, very simple, very effective, very inefficient. So where are we going to apply this to water recovery? Well, how about water recovery for fracking and oil shale? This is kind of a big deal. It turns out that for every barrel of oil that's produced through fracking or oil shale, about $10, $8 to $10 of that is in water recovery. So anything we can do to reduce the amount of cost for that will then decrease the cost of the oil. And of course, as we know, that's where the politicians are heading with the amount of oil we can produce in this country, is using these techniques. Currently, they use these massive trucks that basically go in, and as they pump water in and out, there's huge filtrations with this. They have to take the water when it's filtered. They can't even pump it back in the well many times. They have to filter it again and then haul it out and do something else with it. It's a very expensive process, and unfortunately, it's a very time-consuming process. The ability to go after this market is uniquely important simply because, well, the market is a fairly good size, a $5 billion market, but it is a greatly expanding market. And the filtering process for water we take for granted here in the United States, but in many parts of the world it is simply unfiltered, and that is only going to change as it goes forward. So we really feel this market will increase a great deal. So if you take a look at the equipment alone, just for filtering in this industry, is about $1 billion industry in the United States. It's along those lines, and this is actually current. Even though it shows right now it's about $500 million, if you look at some of the other industries, it's about $1 billion industry in just the simple water filtration. Now, there's a lot of things that we have to do to finish the technology to make sure that it works, and there's a lot of different techniques that have to be applied to this to understand how it works with different flow rates and different chemicals and different absorptions, etc. But the idea is pretty straightforward. Again, it's a very simple process. So what other markets can we apply water filtration to? Well, water desalination. That's also a big market. It turns out the same techniques that we use to pull out the different chemicals, the same techniques can be used to pull out the sodium and the chlorine. And that allows us to have different water desalination. The patent does not include this right now, but I believe it was added to it, and it's in the process of being updated. Electronics and manufacturing water recovery. There is actually a huge amount of heavy metals that are produced, and this is an excellent medium to be able to pull this stuff out. Coal mining. If anybody's ever been near a coal mine, you get a tremendous amount of water that's produced there, and a lot of it's pretty rough water. They have to either hoard it up, hold it up, or ship it out. And this would be an excellent application for something like that. And again, it's an incredibly inexpensive process. The genius was not the invention of one or the other. The genius here was putting them both together. Chemical production is the same thing. Production of polymers, production of oil and gasoline, any of those things require this type of water removal. Military water production, they have to be able to do this in different places, military bases. They have a tremendous amount of wastewater they have to deal with. In addition, they have to be able to filter water that they get. So the current status, again, as I mentioned, is a TRL4. It actually has been tested. It's on a bench state. There's large apparatus that actually makes this work, and they've tested it with different flow rates. Right now, the research has to be focused on tuning. You can imagine you've got flow. Well, how much of a magnetic field do you apply? How high is the flow rate? What's the particulate size of the different activated charcoal? Those are things that have to be researched here, but there's nothing in here that really looks like it's going to be difficult to solve. They're looking at something about 1 to 2 years to take this and bring it up to a technology readiness level of about 6. And again, it will be based on the different filtering parameter requirements. If it's going to be oriented towards the coal and gas industry, there will be a certain set of research that goes on. If it's going to be oriented towards polymer production, that's a completely different set. Big thing is that there's no showstoppers. There's no physics here that we have to violate. It's just simply a matter of, I hate to use this, but good old-fashioned engineering. You have to solve some of these things, and that's where a lot of the work has to happen. Okay, so finally, I just want to drive this home again. It's a really simple idea. There's nothing magical about it. You could probably go home and create some of this stuff yourself. If you took some activated charcoal that you can buy at Walmart and you put some magnets in there, you could probably make this stuff. It's bench tested, it's very straightforward, and there's a very straightforward path to getting this into production. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it is rapidly expanding, especially with the new oil reserves that we're finding in the United States and available to, and also just by the fact that other countries are going to be becoming more conscious on their ability to reprocess the water. It's a very scalable technology. You don't have to have a huge outfit to do this. You can actually make very small outfits depending on your requirements for your water purification. And finally, again, there are just no showstoppers that we see at this time. And that's it. By the way, our PI is here, and if we have any questions, I'm sure he'll be glad to answer them. Yes.
As far as using this for filtration for like a continuous process, water filtration, how feasible is it to remove whatever particulate, say salt for desalination? How easily is it reused and have the particulate removed?
That's a good question. Where's Costas? I'm going to have to refer to him. Can you answer that question?
How easy is it to remove the filtered particulate from say a desalination process to remove the salt from the activated charcoal, activated carbon?
It has removed.
Yes, yeah. So you can continue reusing it.
Yeah, okay. What Vic didn't mention is that we combine this method with capacitive deionization, and that we apply a small potential, so it's very effective to remove the potential and allow the ions to go back to the solution, so you get concentrated salt concentration in the end, and on the other hand, you can get the deionized water.
Yes, sir.
We have a question from the portal, the energy portal, from Craig Butler. His question is, do you see some tie-ins with pyrolyzed biomass that can improve the soil fertility greatly?
Wow.
Answer if I could hear the question better. I'm sorry.
Okay. Do you see some tie-ins with pyrolyzed biomass using pyrolysis
we could use,
that can improve soil fertility greatly?
The charcoal or the activated carbon may come from different sources, so we could use biomass to make the activated carbon.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Dr. Barnett.
How small can you make activated charcoal particles?
How small can you make the activated charcoal? I think it's actually made in kind of a bulk mass, and it's then crumbled into something tiny. One of the things that Costas has to figure out is some of the optimum sizes with the magnetite embedded in it. So the answer is I'm not really sure, but it's small. Costas, can you?
Maybe. Okay. We made it into a micron, several microns, but we can adjust the particle size of the charcoal. Now the particle size of the magnetite has to be below 15 nanometers, and the reason is that it gives that property that Vic mentioned. It's magnetized only in the magnetic field. If you remove the field, it's not magnetic anymore.
So the answer is 1 micron?
Well, 1 micron is one of the current sizes, but he believes he can go below that. So.
Okay, and it may be a really stupid question, but does it have to be black? Can activated charcoal be clear or a color?
That is a really good question. I have no idea.
Please repeat the question, please.
Does activated charcoal have to be black? Can it be clear or a certain color?
Sure, it can be whatever. It doesn't have to be black, but what they want it to be is to have these absorption properties that can remove organics from the solution or heavy metals. So it has to have some functional surface properties.
So I think the short answer is different designer colors would be available. Yes.
Another question from the Energy Portal from Barry Guthrie. Does the magnetite ever separate from the activated charcoal?
Even if there are some particles that are separated from charcoal, then those particles will be removed by the magnetic filter. I'm not sure, actually. We haven't looked into that.
So we're coming into the home stretch. Our next speaker is David Sims, and he'll be speaking about advanced credentialing for trusted networks.
Thanks, Mike. So I'm, as Mike said, David Sims. I'm one of the commercialization managers here. I'm going to be talking about a social networking application towards credentialing. The principal investigators are Brian Gorman and David Resseguy. I believe, yeah, David Resseguy is right back here, so he will be fielding the detailed questions. So I'm going to start off with a quote. This was from a director of a state emergency management agency that was stated in front of our researchers. He said, if you really want to be a hero, you'll solve my credentialing problem. What he's referring to there is that during major natural disasters, rapid, valid information systems that can identify people and create access control is still needed. You would think that this problem has been solved, but it hasn't. Now, this presentation is going to be focused primarily on natural disaster events because that's what the researchers were tasked to do. But I want you to keep in mind that there are other credentialing opportunities here. Think about things like non-disaster events, like for festivals, big sporting events. Also think about some of the social structures we have, education, healthcare, and government, the non-emergency management type. Okay, so this particular director said, here's what I want in a system. I want it to cover a broad range of credentials for public, commercial, and volunteer responders. I want it to be secure, trustworthy, and private. I don't want to see any additional equipment. I don't want any ID cards. And I don't want changes to our existing infrastructure. I want the ability to strengthen or weaken the requirements on a case-by-case basis. I need it to be easily adaptable to changing federal or state requirements. And I want it easily integratable with our current internal operations and management support system. So here's a graphic that shows kind of a simplified solution to this. And so follow with me from left to right on the graphic and as I kind of describe how this would work. So you get up to, there's a natural disaster event, and you've got to get into this event area. So you pull up to a gatekeeper. You have your smartphone. The smartphone has a QR code on it. You show that to the gatekeeper. The gatekeeper takes his or her smartphone that has an app on it that will scan the QR code. The gatekeeper is then connected to your link, your profile, your credentialing profile link, and provided the credentials on your profile match the event's requirements, you will be allowed into the event. So the technology, the TRL level's at 4. By early 2013, it should be TRL 5. It can be ready for a subscription service-based company in about 6 months. The additional research that's needed is to tailor the technology to fit the specific market needs. And as far as potential hurdle, as you might suspect, especially like in a hurricane event, communications networks can go down. So the solution to that is you either bring in a localized network or contract with someone who will be bringing in a localized network to store these credentials on there until the primary network is available. So the proof of concept has been successfully demonstrated in an emergency management exercise at the University of Tennessee in Chattanooga. And in early 2014, this will be part of an 8-state federal emergency management exercise. So what's so important about that? Well, it's going to be 8 states involved. All the big players are going to be there. So you can kind of think about, you've got a lot of potential clients that will be at something like this. And provided it performs as expected, you could start signing up subscription services that day. The intellectual property that we have a patent application that's been filed. The software should be ready for copyright registration in early next year. So why is this unique? It combines both electronic identification and access control. It scales easily before and after an event. There's no physical credentials or specialized hardware, and it also has the ability to react quickly to changing conditions. Performance indicators that make this technology better than existing technologies. It's flexible to address changing federal and state requirements. It scales easily for rapid expansion. It's less expensive, or you get more benefit from the same cost that you're currently paying for your credentialing system. And also, it's relatively secure. I mean, you can think about picture IDs. They're fairly easy to fake. So the researchers are currently working on the prototype to get it ready for this 2014 exercise, and they're also trying to identify opportunities for ongoing pilot programs. Key challenges to overcome: you've got to have buy-in from event managers. It's going to go nowhere if the managers don't buy into this. Also, validating an approach against validating the approach against the needs expressed by the potential licensees or potential users remains to be seen. As far as the commercialization plan, you might think about it like this. A subscription service targeting a narrow market opportunity, for instance, government emergency management, focusing on your critical pieces and deploy it in a limited fashion. It's certainly appropriate for startup. In fact, a startup company would probably be the best for this because of the risk involved. Capital required for the startup, looking at about 6 months to enter, about $500,000 we think. That's usually having a development staff of around 2 to 5 people, and also a CEO and CTO. So some of the partners that we could look at: organizations working with cities for developing emergency and disaster response plans, the big Fortune 500 companies such as Home Depot, Lowe's, big food stores that are interested in disaster recoveries. And also, and those two are the disaster-oriented ones. But as I said at the first of the presentation, think about the non-emergency event planning groups out there, those that work with sporting events or festivals, and then the big social structures in our society, specifically education, government, and healthcare. So, looking at the current practice, I've talked about the application description and the target customers. Look at the far right column under current practice. So what's out there currently is physical credentials, the ID badges, and manual access control, and also the specialized one-off solutions that are either proprietary or custom databases. Okay, so this is just a very high-level competitive differentiation. So some of the bigger players that you've seen or you're familiar with that have physical credentials, and then some that have the electronic credentials. What distinguishes ours from the rest of these is it's both electronic credentials and electronic event access control. So there's three markets that's kind of cobbled together here to give you an idea of what the global market would be. It's projected to be about $12 billion by 2014. The market that could likely be captured, if you look at kind of a first responder community in the U.S., you're looking at about $50 million there. And possibly the business continuity, the Lowe's, Home Depot, organizations like that, about $100 million there. So just kind of in summary, last year in this, at the Spark event, I presented something that was it took social networking principles and applied those to tracking packages through the supply chain. We actually have licensed that to a company it's in a niche market, but they're the market leader in that particular market. And so the point of bringing that up is, though social networking is kind of a popular technology right now, for those who are in the market and for those who kind of understand this, it's a simple and elegant approach to this type of business. In other words, instead of storing a lot of data in traditional databases and owning that data, you just simply create all these links to existing databases. So, and also one last thing, I know David Resige is very interested in seeing this being taken to the market. So having a researcher on board that wants to see this succeed and is excited about entrepreneurial activity, I believe that's important as well. So that concludes this presentation, and I'll be glad to field any questions or route them to David Resige. Thank you. Yes.
Maybe I'm stating the obvious, but in the latest Skyfall movie, James Bond's gun would only shoot if it was in his hand. So wouldn't this solve credit card theft and forgeries if you're using your smartphone as your credit card?
Good.
I mean, certainly that's within the realm of the possible. A lot of the credit card companies are doing things similar to this in that very small niche of identifying who you are. In that case, all they're interested in is this person the name that's on their card? That's a little simpler than perhaps if you kept the same card scenario. Yes, this person has this card, but did their dad allow them to use it for this purchase? That's the difference in what we're trying to accomplish versus just, is this their, are they that person? Does that make sense?
No. No, what?
I mean, it's the access control. So, for example, I may be an employee of Lowe's or Home Depot or Walmart or whoever who wants to get back into an area following a disaster. I may have a really fancy badge that they're absolutely guaranteed this is me and that I am an employee of O&L in this particular case. That does not tell them anything about whether or not I'm currently allowed into that area or not. They now have manual lists that they pass around, that they fax out or hand off in the morning to all the officers at the checkpoints, those sorts of things. So this is combining those two. This is who I am, and mapping it then to access control rules for an event.
What? Yeah, but if I'm buying supper tonight, I hold my smartphone. It reads my thumbprint, which allows my smartphone to. a light, a UR something, which allows the store's machine to read it and charge it. Therefore, there's no fraud unless somebody puts a gun to my head and makes me hold my smartphone.
Yeah, and it can be used for that. It's probably overkill for that. Although I can see the scenario if you start using this for lots of things, when everything starts running back through this as sort of your online identity, then certainly then that starts making a lot of sense. I wouldn't tackle that market standalone, but once you have lots of users, then you certainly could do things like that.
On the authentication side of this, whenever someone comes up to the stand to get scanned in, say like at a university, if I've knocked out somebody and I've grabbed their phone and I now have their code, does the system where everything gets scanned in automatically pop up with the picture of that person and all those various credentials?
Yeah, so think of it like linking to your Facebook or your LinkedIn account. We're going to have a photo ID on there, and it's inside a trusted URL, and so it essentially is a virtualized photo ID in that particular case. There's nothing fancy about a QR code. I mean, a QR code is an open standard, and anybody could print out your QR code. And so the security is not in the QR code. The security is in the fact that it links to a trusted URL, which then serves as both a photo ID and a listing of your current credentials.
I really like this idea, but one thing to consider when we're dealing with these large disasters is power, or getting energy to people is a big deal. So if we rely solely on your cell phone, it might cause a lot of issues, but I guess you could take it case by case.
Yeah, and we've been very careful in working, in our case, with emergency responders to make sure it degrades gracefully. So it certainly is no worse off than they have now. Matter of fact, they're very leery of new technology that people come in and say, hey, buy this and it'll solve your problem. So they want something that degrades gracefully. It can always fall back to a list-based approach that is at most a certain number of hours or days, whatever old, right? And so that's very important. You certainly could do other things like building in more information into the QR code itself. So maybe I still have battery on my phone, even though I don't have connectivity back to a server somewhere else. And like David mentioned a minute ago, you could cache things. So there's lots of sort of intermediate solutions you can do that help you to degrade that as the conditions worsen.
So David, one question.
Mm-hmm.
So you said that $500,000, 5 people will get this up and running. So if I license from you access to the IP and the completed code, what's between there and a product launch?
Well,
Mike, are you saying to get to from what we have now to something that's fully usable, essentially? Yeah. So I mean, the prototype we did now, honestly, I was the sole developer on that, right? So basically, we're taking it from a standalone system that was used, in that demonstration that we did. We want to make sure it's robust, it's scalable. That if there's particular types of credentials that your target market wants to have, you got to make sure you have connections to ingest those sorts of things. So there's stuff to make it shrink wrapped, essentially, moving it from a test and it worked for a localized event, something I want to turn loose on the internet and let people start signing up.
Yeah, thanks, David. Any other questions for David?
So poor John Morris is the man standing between us and the bar. That's right. So John Morris from... that's right. Well, there is the other requirement that we have to cross the 5 p.m. threshold. So the next topic is Content Recommendation Solution for Technical Information Consumers. And again, this is presented by John Morris of the Tech 2020 Center for Entrepreneurial Growth.
So yeah, poor John Morris. I don't get any slides?
None, sorry.
That's what my wife's friends call me, poor John Morris. No. So I have been told by 2 people now that I'm standing in between you people and food, and I'm very well aware of that. So, but it does say on the schedule that I get 30 minutes. I just want to be clear. So I have a little bit different title than is listed on your page. I call this one-stop information shop. So, and it's personalized content recommendations. The PI is Songhua Zhu. And Song, raise your hand. Raise it high. And he's in the computer science division here at the lab. So, how many people search the internet with Google? So everybody searches the internet in one way or the other, right? So when you get information back from a search on the internet, there's no priority to that. Really, it's based on the words that you put in. So you get creative about the words you put in and the order you put them in and all that. And the reason for that is that there's so much information on the internet that it's just overwhelming. And sometimes the piece of information that you need in a search is 3 or 4 pages back and not the first 3 links that you get, okay? Which means you might miss some critical information. So getting information off the internet is like drinking from a fire hose. Now, does anybody know who Mitchell Kapoor is? I don't know who Mitchell Kapoor is either. It really doesn't matter. He's some guy on the internet, but this is absolutely true, and you all know it. So you could have said this, and it would have been true. But that's really the critical problem that this technology is trying to address. So let me describe the technology and how it works in a nutshell. You take this endless stream of stuff off the internet, news, whatever that you're getting from the World Wide Web, and Song has created an interface that basically resides in your browser that's going to look at that information, and it's going to create a digital footprint for the user. So it's mining content and user behaviors to create this digital footprint. And as it creates that digital footprint, it actually takes that footprint and the content that's coming in and matches them together. So it gets user interest profiles. And then that leads to personalized and prioritized content recommendations that come back off the internet. And then all that information that is fed back into this interface, so it's in a constant loop. The more you use it, the better it gets at determining what priority information you need to get off the internet. Okay? So that's the way the technology works in a nutshell. So let's take a web page, okay? Just a browser. So to you, the way this works is that there's a little add-on for the browser that gets loaded, and once it gets loaded, it starts this loop. It starts understanding how you're using the internet. What are you looking at? How are you browsing the internet? What words are you using? And after it does that, it comes back with content recommendations that are prioritized based on that. So you see information directly about how you use the internet and the topics that are important to you. Okay? So that's what this thing does. So the current state of the technology, a year ago it was at 4, today it's at 7. There are prototype systems running right now with actual data. It's ready for commercial deployment and to start testing the marketplace. So the concept is working in prototype. Market acceptance isn't known right now, but it's available. And we think some of the early adopters are behind firewall implementations of this system, basically to use for corporate efficiency. So not just the whole internet, but corporations like Oak Ridge National Laboratory who want their scientists to be more efficient in the searches that they use. Okay? So let's talk about the product evolution. This product can evolve into several things. The first thing is this personalized content model or engine that is a license model. That's the first product that can be deployed using the system. The second is targeted information delivery. So what that means is that instead of the person having prioritized information, the system is now looking to send what information can they send back to the user. So that's down the road after there's lots of information built up by the system. The last is customer and market analysis. So once you have those profiles and information is going back and forth through the system, then you can start to give information to people who base decisions on market analysis and customer analysis. So that's how the product can evolve over time. So let's look at some of the markets that are available. If we take libraries and R&D firms and patent firms and licensing strictly to them for searching, that's about a $500 million market. Again, that's the low-hanging fruit, the early market adoption possibility for this technology. If you take the other way of pushing information back out, publishers and content distributors would be interested in that because they want to know who's reading what and push specific information back out to them. And then last is ad distribution networks. Marketers are very interested in knowing how people use the internet, what words that they use, and specifying specifically where that goes back to them. So those are the three markets that we think this technology would play in. So the first two bullets on this timeline are things that have been accomplished. It's released in beta. There's about 3,000 people that have tested it and used it. So it's been out there and developed. There's an iPhone, iPad compatibility that's been developed as a part of the system. And so the company is ready to start today. We think that revenue can be generated within the first year of a company start, and it would take about $500,000 to get the company off the ground. And then you could be at 60,000 users probably within 18 months of start of this business. So this is a really unique, right now, kind of opportunity that's out there. So I put this up just to show you that there's lots of ways to accomplish what this system does, except that the user has to interact some way. You've got web search engines, you've got portal websites like the New York Times who are trying to filter how you read the New York Times, RSS fields, personalized email lists or feeds. All those things are available on the internet, but this is sitting in the background doing it automatically. So this is not something you have to interact with. This is something that's doing it for you. So in conclusion, there's a need for tools out there that target specific information delivery to the user. This is a product ready for commercialization. It's a huge market opportunity. I think it's easy because it's software. Software is easily pliable and easy to change for customers, and you should try it. It's out there at www.smartdataware.com, and you can go out there and sign up, load the Angel, and try it for yourself. It's out there. Thank you. Questions?
Of the 3,000 people who have used the system, what is their return rate back to this, not using Google or any other search?
So we do have compiled the in-house control group evaluation, both in terms of their subjective evaluation scores and also objective search quality score, with the benchmark data provided by eBay, Google, and Yahoo. And we have that data published in some of our 27 publications, and we got a Best Paper Award by the International Conference on Electronic Commerce on that study.
Do you know how many? You know how many people are not using Google or as a result?
Pretty much everyone uses Google, and then for the eBay, it depends on the type of the web task they perform. But our search engine also captures a certain audience of the professional users who use PubMed for the medical type related searches. But we have this cross-line peer comparison with all the search engines, the popular ones.
John, if especially on the ad portion, you've basically stolen Google's business model. Are you not treading on any IP there?
I think we are not directly competing with Google. What we do is that we will be able to understand on finer granularity what type of users tend to be captivated by certain kind of content. And then we would generate this type of fine granularity analysis on content recommendations. So Google will help you, like say Google have this pricing model, they determine the price for certain Google AdWords, but they do not advise you like what kind of the consumer population will be interested in this type of content. And here the consumer can broadly refer to any kind of information audience. So we have a different service that is to help you understand what's the best audience for this type of the product or materials you want to sell online. And that's our marketing analysis service. And you can always use the traditional Google Ads to then implement your marketing strategy.
Mike.
So Sangwa, can you comment on privacy issues, both in terms of privacy of data that's collected and also the internet surfer's desire to turn on and off the tracking function?
We do realize that early on that the privacy could be one of the major issues, and this is actually one of the reasons that Google does not get very successful with some of the services. So we implemented 3 layers of privacy protection policies. First, we do support the corporate level deployment. So we have a demonstration for the Oak Ridge content, which is based on the ORNL published materials, and the pipeline can be installed behind the corporate wall, and so, which means that no user data, sensitive behavior data, will ever need to be transmitted to the company server. It can always leave behind the corporate firewall. So there's one level of protection. And the second level of protection is for the individual consumers. Actually, on this site, we offered a user credential management feature. People can log onto the site and see what kind of the keywords and the topics we have tracked off the user's browsing behaviors. And we also offered a friendly user interface, allowing people to select those keywords and delete all the relevant records. So people will always have the peace in mind, and they can always change their mind if later on they feel more sensitive about certain type of topics. Lastly, at the algorithm level, we do this recommendation by intentionally incorporating some of the peripheral information so that as an individual user, your content will have certain diversity, and this will protect you from releasing the privacy information on every single case. So that's 3 levels of protection mechanism.
Hey, John. I was first of all like to say great presentations today, but having sort of years ago retired from making software as a job, this type of thing, if you have this piece of paper in your folder, it's great if you write down this website address, because the one thing that would really just knock this out of the park is if you had a few demonstrations to use it and some exemplary information, like there are certain keywords you want to use, but they're like a trade name, but it's a generic word. And going through this and some of the processes, I think that included on a fact sheet and maybe an informational video demonstration on YouTube at some point would really make this a home run. Yeah. And as where it may be very, sort of hard to understand right now because of all the complex issues compared to something very similar and well known like Google that nobody understands really.
Right, right.
John, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
I can tell you from the last 6 months or so dealing with companies applying for funding, I'm seeing a lot of companies trying to help users anonymize themselves on the web, and an equal number of companies trying to help put transactional data back together with user information to identify people for marketing purposes. So there's a great big war going on right now with this. I'm not sure who's going to win, but in terms of being able to control how you are tracked and who's tracking you and what information you're going to use, that looks like a double-edged sword for this. Can you speak to that for a second?
Again, like as Mike commented, we do implement the feature that people can turn on the secure browsing mode. At that phase, no information will be tracked. And then we are talking mostly about corporate applications. So like say at the lab environment, you're not supposed to have privacy. And then this type of the data collected will be properly controlled only for the view of your managers. For example, to see the training needs of a certain division. And also to see when a new policy is announced, what kind of the trend will be reversely monitored from the people's individual browsing. So the information can be aggregated to protect the individual users while still providing valuable feedback for the corporate decision makers.
Yeah, Song and I talked a little bit about that, but Thursday when we ran these presentations, it sparked a conversation, like how I use that word. It sparked a conversation about using it inside the firewall, because that takes away a lot of the privacy concerns. And that's actually something that Song had thought about as an early entry market that I think is really good for this. Once the concept's proven and the value's proven, then people are more readily accepting of privacy issues on the internet once you've proven that it does something for you. So there's a path to get to market, I think, and that path, I think, might start with internal firewall and licensed software rather than trying to give this free to everybody and sell ads off like Google does. Other questions? Thanks.
Okay, before we adjourn, there are a couple of important things I need to take care of, and the first is to say some thank yous. And this simply wouldn't have happened without Carol Rader. The packets that you have, the logistics that have been managed, all of the behind-the-scenes things that made this a success happened because of Carol. And Carol, I want to thank you very much for doing that. And Carol was assisted by Robert Scott, Teresa Snow, and Angie Brock, who took care of things like the visitor badges, the parking signs, and all of that. So again, thank you to them as well. We have a reception that will begin in 10 minutes. What I would ask you to do is look at your score sheet and go ahead and fill out that feedback. And then we have the online scoring. So let's pull that up, and hopefully this will be a little bit on the fun side. And this is available to folks that are also watching on the portal. So as a reminder, if you look at the score sheet that you have, there's a code number beside each one. I think it's a 6-digit code. And if you have a smartphone, then you can text your favorite code to the smartphone code 22333, or you can go to http://pollev.com, either one, and just simply start sending your numbers to those sites, and we'll see how it shakes out.
What are we voting for?
So you're voting for the technology that you believe has the most commercial product opportunity. And I see you've already voted. So it is not. This isn't a speaking competition. This is your view, having seen all of the presentations. Which one looks like it has the most opportunity? And if you need to pair it a little bit more finely, which one in particular for an entrepreneur looks like the best thing to take forward? And when you finish voting, we have the commercialization managers here, so if there are sidebar conversations on opportunities or feedback, we certainly would welcome that as well.
Hey, Michael, is there an area code we need to dial before 22333?
You simply use the number 22333, and that takes care of it. Yes.
It's not working.
And also, Carol can take your score sheets. So has everybody had a chance to vote? Nope, not yet. Okay, so it looks like we have clear separation between the top two. So congratulations to Vig on magnetic filtration processing and Tom on lignin-based carbon fiber. And we should be able to begin the reception in just a few minutes. So again, thank you everybody for coming. Really appreciate your feedback and participation, and I hope this was a productive afternoon for you.
The organizer has ended the session, and this call will be disconnected. Goodbye.
If you would like to make a call, please hang up and try again. If you